this is either gonna age like honey or bread. So over the past several months, I've had a series of thoughts regarding the current state of Nintendo and the Switch that has kind of led me to the conclusion that I don't think we're going to be seeing a fully new Nintendo system at least this year. A good amount of my reasoning has to do with Splatoon 3. In the Direct that took place about a month before the game came out, they confirmed that there's going to be new catalog content that's going to be cycling through for 2 years, meaning we'll be getting new season catalogs until September of 2024. Plus, if we're going by the same release timing as Splatoon 2 and the Octo expansion, we should be getting the side order DLC sometime in September of 2023. And if we consider that, Splatoon is, whether you like it or not, one of Nintendo's key franchises at the moment because of how big it is in Japan, at the very least, I don't see a new system with Switch game compatibility being released for a good while still. Because Splatoon 3 is a competitive team-based shooter. And if, hypothetically, a Switch Pro does get released, and it can run Switch games at a higher resolution or frame rate, and if Splatoon 3 is updated to take advantage of that compatibility, then that's gonna give people with that better hardware an unfair advantage. But I do think more so just the amount of new content that's coming to this key Nintendo franchise is a big telling point that, hey, we're not getting a new system for a couple more years. Not to mention that another key franchise on the Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, is also getting new content and has been for a year at this point through the Booster Course Pass. If a new Nintendo system comes out, it would have to have backwards compatibility with Switch games in order for this content release strategy for Mario Kart and Splatoon to still make sense. But at that point, Nintendo's gonna be releasing a new Mario Kart and a new Splatoon on their next system anyways. So I think Splatoon 3 still being on the Switch and all this DLC coming to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are both very telling that this is kind of more so a stopgap in this next year, or more likely 2 years, in my opinion. And yeah, that does mean that the Switch is going to have a very long lifespan, but I don't know if you listen to the Kit and Krista podcast. I listened to basically every episode. Kit and Krista were former employees at Nintendo, mostly for like social media and that sort of thing. I forget what episode, but they did confirm that Nintendo looks at the first 2 years of a system's life to figure out how long that lifespan should be. When the Wii U just completely flopped, Nintendo was like, okay, we need to get a new system out fast. And because the Switch made record numbers in its first 2 years, and games like Splatoon 3 have still been breaking records in Japan, like, it's still bringing in money for Nintendo. So I don't think they're really in any rush to get something new out within this next year or two. And I really do think we're in the final, at least, year of the Switch, if not more likely year and a half. But I would not be surprised if this thing still has 2 more years left in the tank. We just had a Nintendo Direct here in February of 2023 that announced, for at least this first half of the year, like, we're getting still a steady stream of games, even if they're more so ports and remakes. Additionally, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance came to Nintendo Switch Online. So that, plus the fact that Nintendo kinda tends to restart their retro catalogs with every new system, it hasn't ever carried over 1-to-1, and I don't think they're gonna carry that over to the new system right away. And so that kind of brings up the point of, if a new Nintendo system is coming out in a year or so, why would they now introduce a new major system onto the retro catalog? Side note, but playing GBA games on the Switch just makes you feel like you're playing on like a Game Boy Advance XXL. It is so good. Although, with all of the currently announced games that are coming to Game Boy and Game Boy Advance Switch Online, it does bring up the thought that they are shorter lists of games because, you know, Nintendo might in fact be gearing up for a new system. But even though that list of games that we know are coming to Game Boy Advance may be short, it doesn't mean that they can't announce more games. I mean, they've done that plenty with the NES, SNES, and N64 libraries, and Genesis. This is all to say, I feel like we're in the last year and a half, closer to 2 years of the Switch's life. And I feel like these last few years of releases are really going to be that part of a console's lifespan where we just get some of the best games for the system. I mean, to start off, you know, Tears of the Kingdom, with it being, you know, a sequel to The Breath of the Wild, and with the footage that came out in the most recent Nintendo Direct, it looks as though it's shaping up to be an absolutely amazing game. And also, finally, Pikmin 4. Again, the footage that they showed at the Nintendo Direct looks as though it's shaping up to be a spectacular game. And not only do we know about all these different games that are coming out within the first half of 2023, but think back to the end of 2022, Nintendo released 2 special edition Switch OLEDs, one for Splatoon 3 and one for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but more so for Splatoon 3. And the additional point that just more recently, there was more stock of that special edition OLED that was made available in stores. Why would they still make new stock of that if they were to hypothetically release a new system this year? I don't think it makes any sense. But especially in regards to Tears of the Kingdom, that's a game that people are going to be sinking hundreds, if not a couple thousands of hours into. I did not mean to hit the sleep button. But especially in regards to Tears of the Kingdom, that's a game that people are going to be spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours in. So if Nintendo were to release a new system this year, it would have to be backwards compatible with Switch games, which is possible considering how much of a success the Switch has been. Either Nintendo is just gonna release a new Switch, like a Switch 2, or they're not going to make any money. That's kind of where they're at. And I guess one more sort of off-the-wall point. There is no Rhythm Heaven game on the Switch. If you think back to the end of the lifespan of the Game Boy Advance, where the original Rhythm Heaven was released, like the DS was already out, and in 2009, which was less than 2 years before the 3DS came out, that's when Rhythm Heaven on the DS was released. Roughly a year, if not less, before the Wii U came out, Rhythm Heaven came out on the Wii. And less than a year before the Switch came out, a Rhythm Heaven came out on 3DS. This is all to say, Rhythm Heaven has unintentionally, for me at least, become the signal that a system is in its last year, more or less. And the Switch has not had a Rhythm Heaven, considering how good games sell on the Switch, even if they're lesser series like that. I don't see why Nintendo would pass up the opportunity to put Rhythm Heaven in the hands of millions of people who've never played it before. So my guess is that at some point we're gonna catch wind that a new Rhythm Heaven is coming out maybe at the end of this year or around the start of next year, even if they did an enhanced port or remake of Megamix on the Switch. And because of the culmination of all these points, yeah, that's why I decided to get the Switch OLED. It was really getting to the point where I just could not deal with the size of screen that the standard Switch had. Like, for all intents and purposes, the screen size of the original Switch is definitely tolerable, but because it was playing games that were honestly more suited for a TV. A lot of the times, games just felt a touch too small, and even though I'm not playing in handheld mode all the time, the times where I am playing in handheld mode, it just started to become more and more tiresome, basically. So having this full-on 7-inch screen has been super nice, and it's going to make this last year, if not 2, of Switch releases, if I choose to play them in handheld mode, just that much better. And also, I'm pretty sure the manufacturer that makes the displays in the Switch OLED is Samsung, and when I'm playing in docked mode, I'm playing on a Samsung monitor, so I actually have exact color parity between this screen and docked mode. So yeah, these last couple years of the Switch, I'm gonna be living high and mighty. But even when a new system gets released, I like to wait at least a couple months until I even think about getting it, just so then any hardware inconsistencies get ironed out. And if it is a completely new platform, I'm probably gonna be waiting for upwards of a year before I jump ship, and there's still gonna be Switch games that get released. It's not like that flow of new content gets immediately cut off. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't have any stupid outro or anything to do, so just bye.